The dishes were done. That was the thing Daniel remembered after. How ordinary it all was, right up until it wasn't. Carol had made the pot roast he liked, the one with the little potatoes browned in the drippings, and they'd eaten at the kitchen table the way they always did, radio low, the dog asleep under Carol's chair. Then she said his name in a voice he didn't recognize. "Daniel, I want to ask you something, and I need you to just listen before you say anything." He set down his coffee. 26 years of marriage taught a man to read weather in a sentence like that. "Okay," he said. Carol's hands were folded on the table, knuckles pale. She looked at them instead of at him. "I've been thinking about this for a while now, longer than I probably should have kept it to myself." She took a breath. "I want us to open the marriage." The kitchen clock ticked. Daniel heard it the way you hear things in a dream. Too loud. Too close. "Open it," he repeated, like the word might mean something different if he said it back. "I don't mean leave you. God, Daniel, that's not—" She shook her head, started again, slower. "I mean, I want us to be allowed to see other people. Both of us. With rules. With honesty. I read about it. There are couples who, Carol. Let me finish." He hadn't meant to interrupt. He didn't know what he'd meant to do. His chest felt like someone had reached in and turned a key the wrong direction. "Go ahead," he said. She talked for a while after that, about feeling invisible since Mark and Lily moved out, about the scan last spring that had come back clear, but had still, for 2 weeks, made her feel like a stranger in her own body, about how she loved him. She did, but she didn't know when she'd stopped feeling seen. He heard maybe half of it. The other half of him was doing arithmetic that didn't add up. 26 years, 2 kids raised, a house paid down, and she was sitting across from him asking permission to want someone else. "Is there someone?" he asked when she finally stopped. "Already?" "No." Fast. Too fast, maybe. Or maybe just honest. He couldn't tell anymore which one he was hoping for. "No, Daniel. This isn't about someone. This is about us. About not disappearing into each other's routines for the next 20 years. It doesn't feel like it's about us," he said quietly. "It feels like it's about you." Her face did something small and hurt, and he almost took it back. Almost. "That's not fair," she said. "Maybe not." He stood, because sitting still had become unbearable. "I need to think." "Daniel, I said I'd think about it, Carol. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying yes. I'm saying I need to think." He went out to the porch without his coat. October air, sharp enough to make his eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. He stood at the rail and looked at the Hendersons' porch light 2 doors down and tried to remember the last time Carol had looked at him the way she used to. Really looked. The way you look at someone you can't believe you get to keep. He couldn't remember. That was the part that scared him. She wants permission to feel something new, he thought. And I don't even know what I'd do with it if she gave me the same. He told himself that was a stupid thought. He told himself twice. He didn't sleep. He lay next to Carol in the dark, her breathing slow and even beside him. She'd always been able to sleep through anything. That was one of the things he'd loved about her once, how safe she felt in the world. And he stared at the ceiling and turned her words over like a stone he couldn't put down. Allowed to see other people. He thought of his marriage, the way you think of a house you've lived in so long, you stop seeing it. The water stain in the hallway, the door that's stuck in summer. Familiar. Solid. His. And now Carol had opened a window in that house and let in air from somewhere else, and he couldn't tell if it smelled like freedom or like something about to be lost. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, without meaning to, without wanting to, he thought of the office. of a laugh he heard through his door most afternoons, of someone who always remembered how he took his coffee without having to ask. He shut the thought down hard, the way you'd stamp out a spark on dry grass. But it had already caught. Just barely. Just enough that he noticed it was there. He was still awake when the sky outside the window went from black to gray, and he still hadn't answered his own question. What would I do if she meant it? If she really meant it? And some small, guilty part of him understood that not having an answer yet was itself a kind of answer. He was late, which never happened. Daniel Hargrove did not walk into his own firm 10 minutes past 8, looking like a man who'd lost a fight with his own bed. But that was exactly how he walked in that Wednesday. Tie slightly crooked, coffee untouched in his hand. Renee looked up from her desk the moment the elevator opened. She always did that. Some instinct that clocked him before he'd even cleared the doorway. 3 years of working 20 feet from each other did that to 2 people. "Rough night?" she asked, not unkindly. Something like that. He expected her to let it go. She usually did, when his face told her not to push. Instead, she studied him a beat longer than usual, head tilted slightly, the way she looked at a spreadsheet that didn't balance. "You want me to move your 9 o'clock? No, I'm fine." He wasn't. Just didn't sleep much. Okay. She turned back to her screen, and he thought that was the end of it, and felt an odd little drop of disappointment that it was. The 9 o'clock was the Kowalski account. 3 people from the client side, and Daniel doing his best impression of a man who had prepared for this meeting, which he had not. Halfway through, he lost the thread of a number he should have known cold, a depreciation schedule he'd built himself, and felt the silence stretch a half-second too long before Renee, seated at the end of the table with her notepad, said smoothly, "That's the adjusted figure Daniel walked me through yesterday. I have it here," and slid a printout across without missing a beat, without making it look like a save. It was a save. They both knew it. Nobody else in the room did. After the clients left, he lingered by her desk longer than the moment required, the printout still in his hand. "Thank you for that," he said. "You'd have gotten there. Maybe not today." He almost left it there. Should have left it there. "I meant it, though. Thank you." She smiled. That easy, unguarded smile she had, the one that had nothing performative in it, which was maybe why he'd always liked it so much, without ever examining why. "You're welcome, Daniel." He said her name back, just to say something, and then didn't know what else to say, and stood there a second too long before he caught himself and went back to his office. He worked through lunch, or pretended to. Mostly he sat with the door half closed, staring at a column of numbers that refused to mean anything, replaying the small mechanics of the morning, the tilt of her head, the printout sliding across the table. You'd have gotten there, turning them over the way he'd turned over Carol's words the night before, except these didn't feel heavy. They felt, God help him, like something warm. "Stop it," he told himself. "That's not what this is." But he didn't know anymore what this was supposed to be, because his wife had spent last night redrawing the boundaries of his whole life and hadn't given him a new map, just an open door and a request that he not be angry about it. Around 4, Renee knocked and leaned into his doorway with a file. "Kowalski wants the revised schedule by Friday. I can stay late and get it done tonight, if you want it off your plate." Say no, some steady, married 26 years part of him said. Tell her Friday morning is fine. "That'd be a big help," he heard himself say instead. "I'll stay too. Might as well get it right the first time." Something crossed her face. Not quite surprise, more like a question she didn't ask. "Sure," she said. "I'll order something. You still hate Thai food, or did that change?" Still hate it. Noted. She smiled again, softer this time, and went back to her desk. He sat there after she'd gone, heart doing something he hadn't asked it to do, and thought about Carol at home, probably wondering if he'd give her an answer tonight, and understood, with a small, cold clarity that scared him more than anything else that day, that he was about to stay late at the office, not because Kowalski needed it. He was staying because he wanted to. Carol was waiting up when he finally got home, well past 9. The Kowalski file finished and emailed, and Renee's good night, Daniel still sitting somewhere in his chest, like a coal he hadn't let go cold. "You didn't call," Carol said. Not accusing, just tired. "Work ran long." True enough. He hung his coat and didn't look at her while he said it, and hated himself a little for how easily the half-truth came. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table, he thought, the pot roast table, the I want to open the marriage table, and Carol folded her hands the same way she had 2 nights before, like she'd rehearsed this, too. "Did you think about what I asked?" "I thought about it." He rubbed his eyes. "I don't know what you want me to say, Carol. You're asking me to agree to something, and I don't even know what the something is." "That's fair." She nodded slowly and pulled a folded piece of paper from her cardigan pocket, and he realized with a small lurch that she had written this down, rules and all, like a contract, like a business memo. And some ungenerous part of him wondered how long she'd been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment to hand it over. "I made a list. Things that would matter to me. You can add to it. Take away. Whatever you need." He read it in silence. Honesty about anyone else. Always. No one from their circle of friends. No one from her book club. No one from his firm. She'd actually written that. No one from work. Underlined once. And always, always, come home to each other at night. It should never replace what they had. Only add to it. He set it down. "You already know the rules you want," he said. "You've been thinking about this longer than 2 days. I have." She didn't flinch from it. "I told you that." "And what if I say no?" Carol was quiet a long moment. The dog shifted under her chair. "Then I stay," she said finally, "and I try to be at peace with it. I'm not going to leave you over this, Daniel. I'm asking, not threatening." That should have made it easier. Somehow it made it harder. An ultimatum he could have fought against. A door held open by someone who genuinely meant your choice. Either way, he didn't know what to do with it all. "I need boundaries too, then," he said slowly. "If I'm even going to think about saying yes." "Okay. I don't want details. If either of us does this, I don't want to hear about it after." "Okay. And it doesn't touch this house. Doesn't touch us at breakfast. Doesn't touch holidays. Doesn't touch anything real. Daniel, that's the whole point. It's separate. It doesn't touch this." She reached across the table for his hand, and he let her take it, and felt how strange it was that her hand in his, after 26 years, could feel both exactly the same, and like something he no longer entirely recognized. "I love you. That's not what's in question here." "Isn't it, though?" he said, quiet, almost to himself. She didn't have an answer for that, and neither did he. And they sat like that a while, her hand over his, the clock ticking, the list of rules folded between them on the table like a document neither of them had signed yet. But both of them, somehow, already understood was in effect. He lay awake again that night, Carol's list refolded on his nightstand, and instead of feeling free, he felt like a man standing at the edge of something he couldn't see the bottom of. "No one from work," Carol had written. No one from work. He thought of Renee sliding the printout across the table, of you'd have gotten there, of the coal in his chest that hadn't gone cold, not once, not all evening, no matter how long he sat across from his wife trying to make it. He thought, I could just never bring it up. Nothing's happened. Nothing has to happen. He almost believed himself. Almost. Somewhere in the dark, underneath the almost, he already knew which rule of Carol's he was going to break first. He told himself for 2 weeks that nothing was happening. That was the phrase he used, walking to work, driving home, lying next to Carol in the dark. Nothing is happening, as if repeating it enough times could make it stay true. Nothing was happening. He and Renee just worked late more often now. That was all. The Kowalski account had bled into the Ferris audit, which had bled into year-end prep starting early. And it made sense, didn't it, that 2 people who worked well together would end up working more. That was the story he told himself. It held up fine in daylight. It was harder to hold on to at 7:30 on a Thursday. The office emptied out around them, just his desk lamp and hers, throwing 2 pools of light across the bullpen. The building gone quiet in that particular way. Office buildings do after the cleaning crew has already come and gone. You're staring at that same page, Renee said, not looking up. 3rd time I've caught you. Am I? Mm-hmm. She capped her pen. You've been somewhere else for a week, Daniel. I'm not going to pry. But I notice things. He should have said I'm fine. He'd said it a dozen times already, to Carol, to his sister on the phone, to his own reflection some mornings. Instead, sitting across from Renee with nobody else in the building to overhear, something in him just tipped. Carol wants to open our marriage, he said. The words sat in the room a moment, strange and enormous now that they were out of him, and in the air where someone else could hear them. Renee didn't gasp, didn't recoil, didn't do any of the things he'd half braced for. She just set her pen down fully and looked at him with an attention that felt, for the first time in weeks, like being seen. The very thing Carol had said she was missing, he realized with a lurch, that he was starting to feel too. That's a big thing to carry alone, she said finally. I haven't told anyone else. I figured. A pause. How do you feel about it? I don't know. It was the truest thing he'd said out loud in 2 weeks. Some days I think it's the end of something. Some days I think... He stopped himself. What? Nothing. He shook his head. It doesn't matter. Renee stood, came around the edge of her desk, and for a second, he thought she meant to go get coffee, or her coat. Something ordinary. Instead, she stopped beside his chair and put her hand on his arm. Just above the elbow. Light. Steadying. The kind of touch a friend gives a friend. Except his whole arm went warm under it, and neither of them moved for a beat too long. For what it's worth, she said, quieter now, you don't seem like a man who wants to be free, Daniel. You seem like a man who wants to be chosen. Those aren't the same thing. He looked up at her. Her hand was still on his arm. The office was very quiet. Renee, I should let you get back to it. She withdrew her hand, stepped back, and something in her voice had gone carefully light, the way people talk when they're stepping away from an edge on purpose. I'll finish the Ferris numbers. Go home, Daniel. Get some sleep. He didn't move for a moment after she'd gone back to her desk. His arm still felt the shape of her hand on it, a warmth that hadn't faded the way an ordinary touch should have. He drove home that night replaying her voice. You seem like a man who wants to be chosen, and understood, somewhere under his ribs, that she had named the exact thing he hadn't been able to name for himself. He also understood, lying beside Carol an hour later, both of them silent in the dark, not quite touching, that he had crossed a line just now that had nothing to do with any list of rules. He hadn't touched anyone. He had simply let himself be known. And it had felt more dangerous than anything Carol's paper full of boundaries had ever accounted for. The Ferris audit sent him to Cleveland for 2 days, a client walkthrough that should have been a one-man trip, except Renee had built half the working papers, and the partner insisted she come along to answer questions in the room. Daniel told himself that was a perfectly reasonable business decision. He told himself that on the drive to the airport, and on the flight, and in the rental car, and it held up right up until the second night when the client dinner ended early and a storm rolled in off the lake and grounded every flight out until morning. 2 rooms, 1 floor apart, in a hotel that suddenly felt very small. He knocked on her door around 9, telling himself it was about tomorrow's schedule, and she opened it in a cardigan over the same blouse from dinner, hair down now instead of pinned back, and said, "I was about to call you about the morning meeting," like she'd been thinking the same false, useful thought he had. "That's actually why He stopped. Neither of them moved to close the distance or open it further. "Can I come in for a minute?" "Sure." The room was ordinary. A desk, a window full of rain-streaked dark, the muted television throwing blue light across the carpet. He sat in the desk chair. She sat on the edge of the bed, feet tucked under her, and for a while they actually did talk about the meeting. Page numbers and client questions. Safe ground, both of them working hard to stay on it. Then the conversation ran out, the way conversations do, and the rain kept going, and neither of them reached for the television remote, or their phone, or any of the small tools people use to fill a silence they're afraid of. "Daniel." Renee's voice had changed. Quieter. Careful, the way you'd speak near something that might startle. "Can I ask you something, and you don't have to answer?" "Okay." "That night at the office, when you told me about Carol." She looked down at her hands, then back up. "Did you tell me because you wanted my advice, or because you wanted me to know?" The rain hit the window. He didn't answer right away, because the honest answer scared him. "The second one," he said finally. Something moved across her face. Not triumph, nothing that simple. More like relief mixed with fear, the same mixture he felt in his own chest. "I've thought about you," she said. "More than I should have. For longer than I should have. I want you to know that too, since we're being honest tonight." He stood up. He wasn't sure why, except that sitting still had become impossible again, the way it had on the porch that first night. He crossed the small distance between the desk and the bed, and stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her face up slightly to keep looking at him. "This is the part where I say goodnight," he thought. "This is exactly the part." He didn't say goodnight. His hand found hers instead, not planned, just happened, fingers closing slow around fingers, and she didn't pull away. And for a long moment, they just stood there like that, her hand in his. The rain loud against the glass, both of them breathing like the air had gotten thinner. "Daniel," she said, barely a sound at all. He didn't answer with words. He leaned down, and she rose to meet him, and the kiss was brief and certain, and entirely unlike anything careful. His hand coming up to her jaw, her fingers curling into the front of his shirt like she needed something to hold on to. And then it was over, both of them pulling back at almost the same instant, breathless, staring at each other in the blue television light like 2 people who had just stepped off something high. Nobody said anything for a moment. "What have I done?" Daniel thought, and the thought arrived not as a question but as a plain, cold fact, the way a diagnosis arrives. "What have I just done?" Renee touched her own mouth lightly, like she was checking it was real, and when she looked at him again, her eyes were wet. "I've wanted that," she said, "for longer than I've let myself say." He should have said something about Carol, about the list on his nightstand, about no one from work underlined once in blue ink. He should have said any of the true, responsible things sitting right behind his teeth. Instead, he sat back down in the desk chair because his legs didn't feel entirely steady, and said the only thing that came out whole. "I don't know what happens now." Outside, the storm showed no sign of letting up. Neither, he understood, sitting there with the taste of her still on his mouth and his wedding ring catching the blue light, did whatever had just started between them. The flight out cleared by 10 the next morning, and they sat 4 rows apart on the plane home. His idea, offered quietly at the gate, and she'd agreed without argument, both of them understanding it wasn't distance so much as an attempt at discipline neither of them fully believed in. He drove home from the airport with the radio off, rehearsing what he might say to Carol, and said none of it. Carol asked how the trip went, and he said fine. Long, glad to be home, and kissed her cheek in the kitchen, and felt the coal in his chest flare at the ordinary domestic warmth of it. Guilt braided so tightly into something like tenderness that he couldn't have separated the two if he'd tried. He told himself, driving to work Monday, that Cleveland could be a closed door. One night, one storm, one lapse he'd carry alone and never repeat. He believed that until 8:15, when he walked in, and Renee looked up at him the exact way she always had, except now there was a question underneath it, unspoken, waiting to see which version of him had come back from the weekend. He crossed the bullpen and stopped at her desk instead of walking past it. "I don't regret it," he said, quiet enough that only she could hear. "I've tried to make myself regret it since Saturday. I can't." Something eased in her shoulders, like she'd been braced for the opposite. "I haven't tried very hard to regret it either." That was how it started, in earnest. Not a dramatic unraveling, but a slow, deliberate crossing, both of them walking toward it with open eyes instead of falling. Late nights that were sometimes real work and sometimes not. A dinner 2 towns over, somewhere neither of their circles ate. Her hand finding his under a restaurant table, ordinary as breathing, the kind of gesture he hadn't realized he'd missed until it was happening again. Carol's rules sat in his memory like a contract he'd stopped consulting. No one from work. He didn't bring Renee's name home. He didn't touch this, didn't let it near breakfast, near the dog, near the anniversary dinner they had at the end of the month, where he ordered Carol's favorite wine and meant, in his own way, every toast he made. He told himself the separateness Carol herself had asked for made this honest. He didn't examine too closely how convenient that belief was. What he noticed, mostly, was how awake he felt. Renee didn't need managing the way a 26-year marriage sometimes did. No shared history to navigate around, no old wounds to step past, just the clean, uncomplicated pleasure of being wanted by someone who'd chosen him with nothing at stake but the choosing itself. It didn't feel like betrayal most days. It felt like being handed back a version of himself he'd forgotten existed. "This is what she wanted for both of us," he told himself some nights, driving home late, and almost made himself believe it. That this was Carol's arrangement working exactly as designed. 2 adults, separate lanes, no harm done. Other nights, lying beside his sleeping wife, he understood with total clarity that he was lying to himself, and did it anyway, because the alternative was giving something up He wasn't ready to give up. Carol noticed the change before he ever confessed a word of it. Not proof, nothing she could point to, just the accumulated weight of small things. He hummed doing dishes again, something he hadn't done in years. He reached for her hand in the car for no reason. He was lighter, somehow, in a way that should have comforted her, and instead, one evening in November, made her set down her book and study him across the living room with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You seem happy lately," she said. Not quite a question. Not quite, not one. "I am," he said, and meant it, and hated how easily the truth came out, sounding like an answer to a question she hadn't actually asked. Carol held his eyes a moment longer than comfortable, then went back to her book, and didn't say anything else that night. But Daniel saw it. The flicker before she looked away. The same look he imagined had crossed his own face 100 times these past weeks. Recognition. The beginning of understanding something she wasn't ready to say out loud yet either. Whatever this was, on both sides of it now, was no longer separate from the house at all. It was the phone that did it, the way it always is in these stories, not because Carol went looking, but because Daniel got careless, the way people get careless once something has gone on long enough to feel normal. A message from Renee lit up on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. "Miss you already." "Same time Thursday?" Carol wasn't snooping. She was reaching for his phone to check the weather for their trip to Lily's next weekend. That was all. That was enough. She was sitting at the kitchen table when he came down, the phone face up in front of her, and he knew from the stillness in her posture before she said a single word. "Who's Renee?" Carol said. Her voice was very calm. That was the part that frightened him most. Not shouting, just a terrible, level quiet. He could have lied. Some small, cowardly part of him reached for it. But looking at her face, he understood there was no version of a lie that would survive the next 5 minutes. And he was, whatever else he'd become these past months, not willing to be a man who lied to her twice in one conversation. "She works with me," he said. "It's been going on since the Cleveland trip. 2 months. Carol didn't move. "You told me you don't want details. Now I'm asking you not to have any." "Carol, you said no one from work. I wrote it down. I underlined it." Her voice cracked there, just slightly, the first crack in the calm. "I gave you a list, Daniel. I asked for one thing, and you couldn't even." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I handed you an opening, and you didn't walk through it carefully. You ran." He had no answer for that, because it was true, and he'd known it was true for weeks, and had simply chosen not to look at it directly. "I never wanted this," Carol said, quieter now, the anger giving way to something worse, something closer to grief. "I wanted us to feel less invisible to each other. Not you falling for someone else while I was still sitting here, still choosing you, every single day." "I never stopped choosing you," he said, and even as it left his mouth, he heard how thin it sounded, how much like the sentence of a man trying to hold two things that couldn't both be true. "You don't get to say that anymore," Carol said. "Not? And mean it." They sat with that a long while, the kitchen clock ticking the way it had that first night, the whole conversation having come full circle to a table that had held a pot roast and a proposal and now held the wreckage of both. He didn't see Renee again for 2 weeks, an agony of his own making, evenings spent on the porch in the cold, Carol upstairs in a silence he didn't know how to cross. When he finally told Renee it had to stop, she took it with more grace than he deserved, and more hurt than he'd let himself imagine causing. "I knew this is how it would go," she said. "I think I knew it in Cleveland. I let myself want you anyway." "I'm sorry." "I know you are." A pause. Steady. Dignified. "I hope you figure out what you actually want, Daniel. For both your sakes." He didn't have an answer for her either. He was still looking for it himself. Carol didn't leave. She also didn't, for a long time, fully come back. Some door in her stayed half shut, in a way he understood he had earned, and might spend years trying to reopen, if she let him try at all. They went to see someone, a counselor with a quiet office and careful questions, and sat across from each other saying things out loud they'd never said across their own kitchen table. "I asked for something I didn't understand," Carol admitted. "One session, not looking at him. I thought freedom would bring us closer. I didn't think about what it would cost to actually watch you choose someone else, even for a little while. I thought being wanted again meant something it didn't," Daniel said. "I mistook being seen for being free. They're not the same thing. I know that now. It wasn't an ending with a bow on it." Some nights, Carol still looked at him like she was deciding, all over again, whether 26 years was worth what these last months had cost her. Some nights, Daniel lay awake, certain he'd broken something that no apology could fully mend, no matter how long he spent trying. But they stayed at the table, both of them, night after night, working it out one honest, difficult sentence at a time, not because it was easy, but because, for the first time in longer than either of them wanted to admit, they were finally telling each other the truth. It wasn't the marriage they'd had before. It might, in time, be something harder won and truer for it. Daniel didn't know yet. He only knew he intended to stay and find out. This time, for real, with nothing separate left to hide.